Darius Coleman never liked attention. He'd always been the kind of man who kept his head down, worked with his hands, and minded his business. In the quiet suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, he was known as the gentle mechanic with a tired smile. Someone who could fix engines like they were puzzles but struggled to fix the heavier things in his life, especially the ache around his heart. At 36, he lived in a small rented house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. It wasn't much, but it was home. And it was where he raised his 8-year-old daughter, Maya, the brightest part of his world. Every morning, she'd bounce into the kitchen with her curly hair sticking out in every direction, asking, "Daddy, are you making pancakes or just pretending again?" He'd laugh, scoop her up and say, "You caught me. I'm pretending to be a chef, but these pancakes are real." Their little routines kept him going. Because behind Darius's smile lived a loneliness he didn't show anyone. Maya's mother had left years ago, chasing a new life with someone else, leaving him with custody, bills he couldn't always pay, and a daughter who needed more love than he believed he could give. But he tried. Every single day. He worked at Ray's Auto Repair, a shop squeezed between a laundromat and a pawn shop. It smelled like oil, dust, and old coffee. He earned just enough to pay rent, keep Maya in school, and buy the occasional treat, like the pink backpack she'd hugged for hours when he surprised her last Christmas. But things had been hard lately. Ray, the shop owner, had been talking about selling the place. Business was slow, and one more month of low revenue could mean layoffs. Darius prayed every night that he wouldn't lose his job. He'd already taken on side gigs fixing cars in neighbors' driveways. Some nights he worked until midnight. Some nights he cried quietly when Maya was asleep. He wasn't ashamed of being tired. He was ashamed of being scared. One Friday afternoon in early fall, everything changed. Ray rushed into the shop, waving a hand. "Darius! You gotta come outside. Now." Darius wiped his hands on a rag. "What's going on?" "Big-time CEO. Fancy guy. Said his car died on the road and he found our shop on Google. And, well, you just gotta see this thing." Darius stepped outside and froze. A red Ferrari F8 Tributo sat there like a jewel on wheels. The paint glowed like fresh blood in sunlight. The engine, silent and cold, hinted at money he could never imagine. Standing beside it was a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit and sunglasses that probably cost more than Darius's monthly rent. "About time," the man said impatiently. "I've been waiting 10 minutes. Do you people move at the speed of snails here?" Ray kept his head down. "Sir, this is my best mechanic. He'll take care of you." The man looked Darius up and down, eyes lingering on his worn hoodie, rough hands, and dark skin. A smirk lifted one corner of his mouth. "This is your best mechanic," he said loudly. "Really?" Darius swallowed. "Sir, what seems to be the issue?" "The issue," the man said, tapping the hood, "is that this masterpiece of engineering stopped running. I was on my way to a board meeting. Do you know how much time you've cost me?" Darius ignored the attitude. People with money often talked like that. "I'll take a look." As he opened the hood, he noticed quick details, wiring issues, a failed sensor, and a small fire mark around the fuse box. He could fix it, but it wouldn't be easy. "Can you repair it or not?" the CEO demanded. "Yes," Darius said quietly. "But it'll take." "That car is worth more than your entire shop," the man cut in. "Prove you can fix it." Ray motioned with his hands. "Sir, please. He's very good at this." The CEO lifted a hand to silence him. Then he laughed, shaking his head. "You know what?" he said loudly. "I'll make this interesting. Fix my Ferrari in under 2 hours, and I'll give you the car." Ray gasped. Several people walking down the street stopped to stare. Darius blinked, stunned. What did you say?" he asked. The man sneered. "The Ferrari's yours if you can fix it. But when you fail, and you will, I'll make sure to leave a review about how incompetent this place is." Ray stepped forward nervously. "Sir, That's not. But Darius raised a hand. It's okay. I accept. The CEO burst into laughter. Of course you do. Dream big, right? Darius didn't respond. He simply rolled up his sleeves and got to work. But inside, he felt something he rarely let himself feel. Hope. He started carefully, examining every wire, every fuse, every sensor. The engine was beautifully built but had been neglected. Someone had wired aftermarket sensors incorrectly, causing a short. That short burned out a portion of the fuse box, and if not fixed right, the engine could suffer irreversible damage. "Daddy, can I help?" a soft voice asked. Darius turned sharply. Maya. She had walked from school down the block, holding her little backpack, looking at the Ferrari with wide eyes. "Baby, wait on the bench," he said gently. "This is important." The CEO raised an eyebrow. "That your kid?" "Yes, sir." "Might want to teach her some real-life lessons. Like knowing your limits." Darius clenched his jaw. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just kept working. Meanwhile, Maya whispered to Ray, "Why is that man talking like that?" Ray just shook his head. "Some folks forget kindness when they get money." As Darius removed the burned fuse box, he realized he didn't have the exact replacement part. But he had something else: skill. He could rebuild it manually, wire by wire, using spare fuses and connections from old cars in the shop. It would take time, patience, and steadiness. His hands moved like he was playing a quiet song. He thought of his father, who had been a mechanic too, a man who died of a heart attack when Darius was 19. He could still hear him say, "Son, machines don't judge you. They just tell the truth. Fix them right, and they'll work for you." He missed his father every day. As he worked, sweat dripped down his face. His fingers grew numb. People gathered around, murmuring, filming on their phones. The CEO kept looking at his watch and sighing loudly. 30 minutes left. Darius connected the final wire and tightened every bolt. His chest tightened with fear. If he made even one mistake, the entire engine could blow. He lowered the hood and turned to the CEO. "It's ready. Start it," the man said. Darius walked around, sat inside the Ferrari, and turned the key. The engine roared to life instantly, smooth and fierce, like a wild animal waking up. The crowd erupted in cheers. Ray nearly cried. Maya clapped so hard her hands turned red. But the CEO's smile faded. In fact, he looked stunned. "That's impossible," he whispered. "I took it to 2 dealerships. They said it needed to be shipped to a specialist." "Well," Ray said proudly, "you just met our specialist." The CEO stared at Darius, then at the crowd, then back at the car. His jaw tightened. He hadn't expected to be proven wrong. And he certainly hadn't expected to lose his Ferrari to a man he assumed was beneath him. "Sir," Darius said calmly, "you made a deal." The CEO scoffed. "Do you really think I'm giving you a $300,000 car? That was a joke." Darius stiffened. "I took it seriously." "Then that's your problem," the CEO snapped. Maya's smile faded. "But my daddy fixed it." The CEO waved a dismissive hand. "Life's not fair, kid. Get used to it." People in the crowd gasped. Some muttered angrily. Darius felt the old pain rise inside him, the feeling of being invisible, belittled, undervalued because of what he looked like, not what he could do. His father had faced the same prejudices. His grandfather too. He thought of Maya watching all of this. He didn't want her to grow up thinking she was less than anyone else. The CEO walked toward the car door, but Darius stepped in front of him, not aggressively, but firmly. "You gave your word," he said softly. The CEO scoffed. "And I'm taking it back." "What are you going to do? Sue me?" "You can't afford a lawyer." Those words cut deep. But before Darius could respond, something unexpected happened. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. She wore jeans, a blazer, and carried a press badge. Actually, she said loudly, I work for Channel 7 News. And I filmed the entire thing. Your offer, your mockery, the time limit, everything. The CEO turned pale. And if you go back on your word, she continued, this will be on the evening news. The CEO opened his mouth but no words came out. More people raised their phones, showing they had recordings too. The situation had changed completely. Darius didn't want revenge. He only wanted fairness. But the CEO suddenly looked less powerful, less arrogant, and more afraid. He swallowed hard, face red with humiliation. Then he muttered, fine. He held out the keys with a trembling hand. The Ferrari is yours. Maya gasped. Ray nearly shouted with joy. The crowd cheered as Darius stood frozen, the keys in his palm, not believing what had just happened. But what happened next was something no one expected, and it would break every heart in the parking lot. Darius felt the weight of the Ferrari keys in his hand, but he wasn't smiling. The crowd was cheering, Maya was bouncing on her toes with excitement, and Ray slapped him on the back saying, you did it, kid. You really did it. But something inside Darius felt unsettled. Almost hollow. The CEO stood stiffly, jaw clenched, face burning with humiliation. People were still recording him, whispering, serves him right, and that mechanic really showed him. But as the CEO turned to leave, something unexpected happened. His legs wobbled, and he stumbled forward, barely catching himself on the hood of a nearby car. No one noticed except Darius. His instincts reacted instantly. He stepped forward, catching the man's arm before he collapsed to the pavement. Sir, you okay? Darius asked. The CEO pulled his arm away weakly. I'm fine. But he didn't look fine. Sweat dripped down his temples. His hands shook. His breathing was shallow and uneven. Maya tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, did he trip? No, baby, he whispered. Something's wrong. The crowd, hungry for drama moments ago, quieted. The reporter lowered her phone. Ray frowned in worry. The CEO took one unsteady step, then another, and suddenly collapsed to his knees. People gasped. Someone call 911, a woman shouted. But Darius was already kneeling beside the CEO. Sir, look at me. Can you hear me? The man shook his head, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. I can't breathe right. Darius recognized the signs immediately. His father had suffered the same symptoms the night he died. A heart episode. Lay him down, Darius said calmly. Several people helped. The CEO's breaths came out unevenly, his hand clutching his chest. Darius lifted his chin slightly to open his airway. Stay with me. Don't close your eyes. The CEO groaned. Why are you helping me? After everything I said. Because you're a human being, Darius said. And you have someone, somewhere, who cares whether you live or die. Tears leaked from the man's eyes. His voice shook. My son. I haven't talked to him in years. Darius felt a sharp pinch in his chest. Broken families. Lost time. Regret. He knew that pain too well. The ambulance arrived in minutes. Paramedics rushed over, lifting the CEO onto a stretcher and connecting wires to his chest. Is he gonna be okay? Maya asked, clutching her backpack. Maybe, Darius said softly. If they get him help in time. As the ambulance doors were about to close, the CEO reached out a hand, his eyes desperate. Come with me, he whispered. Darius hesitated. Why him? Why now? Ray nudged his shoulder. Go. We can watch Maya. Darius nodded and climbed into the ambulance. The doors shut behind him. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and worry. The CEO, whose name was Robert Stanton, was rushed into emergency care while Darius waited in the hallway, hands shaking, trying to understand why he felt so responsible for a man who had mocked him. He sat down and covered his face with both hands. His father had died in a hospital that looked just like this. He remembered holding his father's hand, whispering, "Stay with me, Dad. Please." But the man who had taught him everything slipped away before help arrived. Now he was watching another man fight for his life. A nurse came out an hour later and said, "He's stable. You can see him." Darius walked quietly into the room. Robert lay in the bed, pale and weak, oxygen tubes in his nose. His eyes opened slowly, and he seemed surprised that Darius had actually stayed. "You didn't have to come," Robert whispered. "You asked me to," Darius responded. A weak laugh escaped Robert's lips. "People usually walk away when I fall." "That's the thing about falling," Darius said. "It shows who's willing to pick you up." Robert swallowed hard. "Why? Why were you kind to me after I humiliated you?" Darius leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Because if I teach my daughter that kindness depends on other people's behavior, she'll become like the people who hurt us." Robert stared at him with misty eyes. "Where is she now?" "With my boss. She's safe." Silence lingered in the room. Machines beeped rhythmically. A monitor blinked beside Robert's bed. "I made a fool of myself," Robert whispered. "In front of a crowd. In front of you." Darius shrugged. "Everyone has bad moments." "No," Robert said, his voice trembling. "I've had a bad decade." Darius tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Robert blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "My wife died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was the only person who kept me grounded. After she passed, I buried myself in work. Shut out my friends. Ignored my son until he stopped calling." Darius felt the weight in Robert's words. Grief had a way of turning the strongest people fragile. "You don't have to stay alone," Darius said gently. Robert gave him a strange look. "I almost died today, and the only person at my bedside is a man I insulted." Darius didn't reply. Robert took a shaky breath. "You fixed my car. You saved my life. And I treated you like garbage. I'm ashamed." The room felt heavy with regret. "I've said sorry to employees before," Robert murmured. "But never when I meant it." "You don't need to apologize to me," Darius said quietly. "Just do better moving forward." Robert nodded slowly. "I want to." He looked at Darius for a long moment, then whispered, "The car. The deal." "I don't need the Ferrari," Darius said. "But I made a promise." "It was a bet made out of anger," Darius replied. "I'm not trying to profit from your worst moment." Robert shook his head. "It's not about the car anymore. You showed my son's compassion. Something I should have shown years ago." "You can still fix things with him," Darius said. "You're alive. That's your second chance." Robert looked away, tears sliding down his cheeks. After a moment, Darius headed toward the door. "Get some rest. I'll check in tomorrow." "Wait," Robert called. "Will you really come back?" "Yes," Darius said. "I will." Darius arrived home exhausted. Ray dropped Maya off and hugged him like a brother. "You did good today," Ray said. Maya looked worried. "Daddy, is that man gonna die?" "No, baby. They're taking care of him." "Why were you sad when he got sick?" she asked softly. "Because people hurt sometimes," Darius said. "And even if they hurt us, we shouldn't want them to suffer." Maya hugged him tightly. He cooked her dinner and tucked her in early. But later, when the house was quiet, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the Ferrari keys still in his pocket. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to take advantage. But he also knew that life had given him very few blessings, and maybe this was one meant for him. The next day, Darius returned to the hospital. He expected to see Robert recovering quietly. But instead, Robert was sitting up, with a man in his early 20s standing beside him, crying hard while holding Robert's hand. His son. The same son he had spoken about in regret the night before. Darius froze in the doorway. Robert saw him and motioned him inside. His voice was soft and full of emotion. Darius, this is my son, Andrew. Andrew wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. Dad told me what happened. If you weren't there yesterday. Darius lifted a hand. I'm glad he's okay. Andrew swallowed. Thank you. You saved his life. Robert looked at the two men and said quietly, and he saved more than that. He saved me from myself. Darius didn't know how to respond, so he nodded awkwardly. Then Robert cleared his throat. Darius, about the Ferrari. I'm keeping my word. I told you, Darius said. I don't need it. But you earned it. Fair and square. It wasn't about beating you, Darius said. It was about proving to myself that I could do something extraordinary. You did, Robert insisted. But this car, it's not just a car. It's the one thing I held onto after my wife died. She loved this Ferrari. Said it was the one impractical thing she encouraged me to buy. Letting it go means letting go of the past that kept me stuck. Darius's chest tightened. You sure? Yes, Robert whispered. I wanted to go to someone who reminded me I still have a heart. Before Darius could argue again, Maya ran into the room. Ray had dropped her off. Daddy, she said. The nurse showed me where you were. Robert smiled at her, this time with softness rather than arrogance. Hello again, little one. Maya smiled shyly. Daddy told me you were sick. I made you a drawing. She handed him a piece of paper. On it was a scribbled picture of a car and 3 stick figures holding hands. Robert stared at it and broke down crying. Everyone fell silent. It wasn't a sad cry. It was a broken man releasing years of regret. Finally, he whispered, Thank you. Darius felt his own eyes burn. Because he knew what he was seeing. A father getting a second chance. A man realizing the value of kindness. And a moment that would change all of their lives forever. The next few days passed quietly, but nothing inside Darius felt quiet. He kept the Ferrari parked behind the shop, hidden from the street, as if showing it too soon would invite bad luck. Every morning before opening the garage door, he would slip outside and stare at it in the soft blue light. The red paint glowed even at dawn, like a promise he didn't know whether to trust. He touched the hood once, gently. What am I supposed to do with you? He whispered. Maya ran out of the shop, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Daddy, are we driving it to school? She asked excitedly. No, baby. Not today. Tomorrow. Maybe someday. He didn't tell her he wasn't sure he would ever drive it at all. Because in his heart, the car had become something bigger than metal and gears. It was a symbol of a moment when life turned unexpectedly, when a cruel challenge became the doorway to healing not only for him, but for a man who had lost himself to grief. That week, Darius visited Robert every other day in the hospital. Their conversations grew more honest each time. On Wednesday, Robert asked him about his life, the kind of questions rich men didn't usually ask working men. How long have you been fixing cars? Since I was a kid, Darius said. My dad taught me everything. He was good too. People came from all over town to him. He used to say engines talk to you if you listen. Robert smiled weakly. Sounds like a wise man. He was. I lost him too soon. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Robert said slowly, losing people, it leaves holes you don't know how to fill. You try money. You try work. But nothing fits. Love fits, Darius said quietly. Family fits. That's what I hold onto. Robert nodded, his eyes wet. You're a better man than I ever was. On Friday, Robert was released from the hospital. Darius drove him home in Ray's old pickup because Robert wasn't allowed to drive. His son, Andrew, walked beside them, talking excitedly about cooking dinner and having a fresh start. Darius noticed the way Robert listened, not with half attention, but with full focus, as if every word mattered. At the door of his house, a huge place with tall windows and stone pillars, Robert turned to Darius. "Can you come inside for a minute?" Darius looked at his oil-stained jeans. "I don't know if I should track dirt into your house." "Please," Robert insisted. "It's just a house. You're welcome in it." Darius followed him inside. The house was beautiful, but lonely. Dust gathered on untouched surfaces. Pictures of Robert's late wife stood on every shelf, her smiling face frozen in time. "She'd have liked you," Robert said, surprising him. "She always loved people with gentle hearts." Darius didn't know what to say. For a moment, he wished his father could see him now, standing in a mansion not because he wanted wealth, but because kindness had brought him there. Robert reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. "These are the papers for the Ferrari. Signed. Notarized. It's legally yours." He handed it to Darius. The weight felt heavier than the keys. "I don't know how to thank you," Darius whispered. "You already did," Robert said. "You showed me the kind of man I should have been all along." Before he left, Darius stopped in the doorway. "If you need anything, even just someone to talk to, I'm around." Robert nodded, wiping his eyes. "I'm holding you to that." Weeks passed. Winter crept into the city. Ray sold the repair shop to a new owner, a young woman named Nina who loved cars and respected Darius's skill. She made him head mechanic and raised his pay for the first time in years. Maya grew happier too. She proudly told her teachers, "My daddy fixes cars better than anybody in Ohio." Darius would laugh, but secretly, her words healed him. One chilly Saturday morning, Darius finally took the Ferrari for a drive. Not fast. Not wild. Just cruising down the empty main road near sunrise with Maya in the passenger seat, hands gripping the door in excitement. "Daddy," she whispered, "I think Grandpa would be proud." His throat tightened. "I think so too, baby." But for all the joy the car brought, something else shocked him even more. People started coming to the shop, not because of the Ferrari, but because of what happened that day with Robert. The video had gone viral. Millions watched the quiet mechanic who didn't argue, didn't fight, didn't insult. He simply worked, saved a life, and changed a man's heart. One afternoon, as Darius was replacing spark plugs on a customer's truck, he heard someone call his name. He turned, and froze. Robert stood there, healthier, calmer. And beside him, a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. "Darius," Robert said, "I want you to meet Denise. She's someone special." Denise stepped forward. "I've heard so much about you. Thank you for helping him. He's truly changing." Darius smiled. "We all deserve a second chance." A silence passed. Then Robert asked, "How are things going with the shop?" "Good," Darius said. "Better than ever." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "And your life? Your dreams?" Darius shrugged. "I don't dream much. Just want my daughter safe, happy, and loved." Robert placed a hand on his shoulder. "You deserve more than survival. You deserve a life." Later that week, something unexpected happened. Robert invited Darius and Maya to dinner. Not in a fancy restaurant, but in his home, with Andrew and Denise. The night was filled with laughter, stories, and the soft healing of two families rebuilding their worlds. Maya sat beside Andrew, giggling as he taught her how to fold napkins into flowers. Denise helped Darius wash dishes afterward and said quietly, "You know, Robert sees you as the brother he never had." Darius stared at her, touched and a little overwhelmed. "I'm just a mechanic." "No," Denise said gently. "You're the man who pulled him from the darkest place he'd ever been." Months turned into seasons. The bond between the two families grew. Robert visited the shop often, not to check on cars but to check on Darius. They talked about life, fatherhood, grief, and healing. Robert apologized more times than Darius felt necessary. One spring morning, as Darius tightened bolts under a Dodge, he heard footsteps. Robert walked in with an envelope. "What's that?" Darius asked. "Something I hope you'll accept." Darius stood and opened it. Inside were business documents, ownership papers. Robert had bought the entire shop and signed it over to Darius. "I can't take this," Darius whispered, trembling. "You can," Robert insisted. "Because you're the man who deserves it. You're the man who made me want to be good again." Tears burned Darius's eyes. "Why me?" "Because you saved my life. Not just my heart. My future." Darius hugged him, something neither expected. Later that night, he took Maya for a long walk. She held his hand, swinging it gently. "Daddy, why are you crying?" "Because sometimes," he said softly, "good things happen after a lot of bad things." "Is that a blessing?" she asked. "Yes," he whispered. "A big one." 1 year later. Ray's old shop was now Coleman Auto and Performance. The sign was new, shiny, and proud. Customers lined up around the block. Darius hired 3 mechanics, including a teenage boy from the neighborhood who needed guidance. Maya, now 9, had her own little corner in the office where she colored pictures of cars and greeted customers with a smile. Robert visited often, healthier and happier, with his son and Denise. Sometimes they stayed for dinner. Sometimes they just checked in. But always, they came with warmth. The Ferrari sat framed in the shop office, a symbol of humility, healing, and redemption. Sometimes customers asked, "Why don't you sell it?" And Darius always said, "Because it changed more than just a car. It changed a man." One evening, Darius stood outside the shop, watching the sunset with Maya. The wind smelled like spring and fresh beginnings. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes, baby." "Why did that man give you his car?" Darius thought for a moment. "Because when someone shows kindness, even after being hurt, it can remind another person of the good they forgot they had." Maya nodded slowly. "So kindness fixes hearts too?" Darius knelt and wrapped his arms around her. "More than anything else in the world." She looked up at him, smiling with a softness only a child could give. "Then you have the strongest heart, Daddy." He closed his eyes. Those words healed something inside him that had been broken for years. And in that quiet moment, with the sun melting into the horizon and his daughter hugging him tight, Darius realized something powerful. Life wasn't fair. But sometimes, when grace met courage, it gave you exactly what you needed. Not a Ferrari. Not money. Not revenge. But family. Forgiveness. And a future filled with hope.